Okay, so I decided that I'm actually going to do the joints here so that way you guys can see exactly the base skeleton, how it's created. So I'm going to start off with the joints for the spine all the way through the neck. So I'm going to start off with the pelvis or the hip joint, then the upper hip, middle of the waist, bottom of the rib cage, the sternum, the top of the rib cage, which is kind of closely lined up to the clavicle, the lower neck, mid neck, head, and then that's all that technically we need, but I usually like to create also the top of the head right here, or kind of like a placement, and then an aim joint so that way we know which way the skeleton is facing. And I can push return and you can see the skeleton that we have here. We're going to end up naming all of these joints, but right now for the way we have it set up, we don't need to worry about that because we're going to do it all in scripting. But this is the base setup that we have for the head, and we're going to be using this to be able to get the values. So I'm going to look at the arms. So I want a clavicle joint, and then here, that's about right. Then I'm going to go to the shoulder, and that shouldn't be lined up, so let's line it up there. And when I'm lining it up, I'm just using the middle mouse button so that way it lines up correctly. I'm gonna use that for the elbow, and then check it in another viewport to make sure it's lined up correctly. Then we'll go down to the wrists. Okay, and then I'll push enter to finalize that. And then let's do the leg. So here in the leg, I'm going to create a joint chain. I'll create the hip, and I need to make sure that I align it correctly. Then down to the knee, ankle. Oh, let me undo that, so I'm just going to do Control Z. I want to make sure that it's lined up on the knee correctly. And just make sure that's lined up, and then go to the ankle. And that looks pretty close to lined up. Then going down to the ball of the foot, and then the toes. Okay, so now I have all that set up. That looks pretty good. Push F4, or not F4, sorry, just 4, and see the skeleton there. Now the only thing I have left to do is the hand. So let's look on the side viewport. I'm going to create a joint, and that's going to be the palm, and that looks pretty well set up. I'm going to push enter. Then from here I need the thumb. So we are going to, actually before I go too much further, I'm going to undo that but create it from here just so that it's lined up a little bit better. Oops. I selected the other joint, which I don't want to do. Let's push enter. Go to here, and I'm going to create it a little bit off but then realign it. And then I'm just trying to make sure that it is aligned appropriately. You can double check it in the 3D viewport. So we can see it's a little bit high there. Okay. And then the thumb. There we go, that looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna push enter. And all we're really worrying about right now is the position information. We're not really worrying about any of the orientation or anything like that yet. So I'm gonna do this on the side viewport. And that looks like it placed pretty well. Here it's a little bit hard to tell where I'm placing, so I want to make sure I double check it in multiple viewports. So here we can see the first joint was kind of close, but it's still off. So I'm gonna do Control Z till I get to there, and I'm gonna reposition it. So that way it is exactly where I need it, and we can rotate around to make sure that the pivot point for the rotation of this joint is correct. Okay, then we can place the next joint. And there's so much geometry overlapping, it might be a little bit hard to see where you're going to be. But try to get it as close as possible. That looks pretty good. And then coming out to the front. Okay, so I'll finalize that. Then Control C, Control V, and I am just going to get it kind of roughly positioned for the other fingers. Control C, Control V, and rotate it as well. And Control C, Control V. Okay, now that I have the other joints placed roughly where I need them, I can make sure I make any adjustments that I need so that it all rotates, or we're not really too worried about the rotation yet. We just want to make sure that it's positioned in a good spot, because we're going to use Python to align everything here. Okay, line this up, and the pinky finger is much smaller than the other fingers, so we're gonna have to adjust a little bit of the positioning there. And as we can see, it's also quite a bit lower. That looks pretty good now. Okay, so we have all of the joints placed where we want. We can start parenting it all together just so that it's all a single mesh, so that we can see what the skeleton would be like. So I'm just selecting the child and then the parent and then pushing P. P, and then P. Okay, so that is the half of the skeleton that we need. And then we're going to use this information in our Python script to automate the creation of the skeleton. And then we will do that in the next video. All right, see you there.